This is the 18th video in a series where I am teaching comprehensive lessons on the top 25 jazz standards for guitar players. There's a link to a playlist of this entire series in the description. And the song we are learning in this video today is Body and Soul. If you're just here to learn the chords, or just here to learn the melody, or just some specific aspect of the song, like the scales to use to improvise over this, just use the timestamp links in the description to go to the section that you're looking for. We cover all of that stuff. Here's what we're going to go over in this lesson. First, I'll tell you about the song Body and Soul and why it's worth learning. Then I will teach you the melody by clearly demonstrating it on the guitar with notation and tab on the screen while I play it. I'll teach you both the easiest chord shapes you can play for this song and the most common jazz chord shapes for this song, all with chord diagrams on the screen and demonstrations. I'll teach you the scales you can use to improvise over Body and Soul, all with demonstrations, scale diagrams on the screen, all of that. And every lesson in this series also includes a unique piece of advice for how to truly internalize a jazz standard on the guitar, so I will share that. And lastly, I'll give you a guitar listening recommendation for this song. For a lot of the lessons in this series, I'm also demonstrating chord tone improvisation, which is especially important on some songs, and this song I think it's more important on than others. And you can access and download all of the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on YouTube by becoming a premium supporter of the channel. There's a link in the top of the description to join. You'll get PDFs of the chord progression lead sheet, the scale breakdown, the scale diagrams, the chord shape diagrams, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. And usually you'll get everything except for the melody sheet music, because if the song is not in public domain, I cannot provide that, but I can provide all the other resources. But there are several songs in this series that are in the public domain, in which case you'll get the tab and melody lead sheet, all of the stuff. And this song, Body and Soul, is in public domain, so you'll get that as well. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support and get all those extra resources, or go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. Body and Soul is one of the most iconic and influential ballads in the jazz repertoire. It was composed in 1929 by Johnny Green, with the lyrics by Edward Heyman, Robert Sauer, and Frank Eiton. The song was written in New York for British singer and actress Gertrude Lawrence, who introduced it to London audiences in 1930. The song became a jazz standard and is considered one of the most recorded jazz songs of all time, with nearly 3,000 versions to date. According to my research, Louis Armstrong was the first jazz musician to record Body and Soul in October of 1930, but Coleman Hawkins in 1939 took the song and the art form of jazz to a whole new level. Coleman Hawkins' recording of Body and Soul is regarded as a landmark in jazz history. In his version, Hawkins largely ignored the original melody and instead used the song's complex harmonic structure as a foundation for extended improvisation. And this approach was highly influential and is often credited with establishing the tenor saxophone as a leading jazz instrument and heralding a new era in jazz improvisation. That particular recording by Coleman Hawkins is one of my favorite recordings, period, of all time. I've listened to it, I don't even know, hundreds of times at least, if not thousands of times. I like to put it on loop when I'm working and just soak it in. It is an absolutely beautiful recording. Body and Soul is typically performed in D flat major and features a 32-bar AABA form. The tune is harmonically very rich, with frequent 2-5-1 progressions and unusual modulations, especially in the bridge, making it a challenging but rewarding piece for improvisers. Its emotional depth and harmonic complexity have made it a staple for jazz musicians, both as a ballad for expressive soloing and as a study in advanced harmonic phrasing and modulation. Body and Soul remains a must-know standard, still frequently performed in jazz settings around the world, and it's a great one to have in your repertoire if you want to show some musical maturity and depth. Let's get started by learning the melody. I'm going to play you the melody with guitar, tab, and notation on the screen. I encourage you to practice along with this demonstration as you are working on the melody. Here it is at 70 beats per minute. All right, let's look at the chords just for a second before I demonstrate them on the guitar and show you the chord shapes and everything. Lots going on here, very dense. Even at a slow tempo, it's going to move fast. We have chords 1 per beat sometimes. It's lovely and lush. Now this chord here is the 5 of E flat minor. The key is not E flat minor though, the key is D flat major. We resolve to D flat major here, we resolve to D flat major here. The key signature is D flat major. Little trick is that if you have multiple flats, the second to last flat is the key. So that second to last flat is D flat and the key is D flat. Well, this is the 5 of 2 because that's the 2 chord of D flat. This is one instance where you could have a dominant 7 chord with a natural 9 but a flat 13. Whereas if you've seen my other videos, you'll hear me talk about this ad nauseum, that the flat 13 or flat 9 imply that the other one is there. So if I see on a lead sheet flat 13, I'm thinking of it as B flat 7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13. It's coming from the E flat harmonic minor scale. Now I still treat this way, but I'm pointing this out just because it's a situation 5 of 2, where if you compare the parent scale key, D flat major, and just alter what needs to be altered for this, you get that major third there, you take the chord tones and then otherwise fill in with the parent scale, the key center scale, you would actually get a natural 9 here. So the 5 of 2 would naturally have a natural 9. I still like to add flat 9 all over the place because it adds extra tension. So I just still stick with my default of dominant 7 going to a minor chord. It's going to be harmonic minor. It's going to have a flat 9, whether it says that or not. So even in this B flat here, if I know that it's going to E flat minor, I'm actually going to treat that as B flat 7 flat 9 with a flat 13 as well, for the most part, almost always. Any lead sheet I see or whatever, that's just what it is wanting in my mind. So actually I should have probably written that for you here, but you need to learn that at some point. That context is so much of it. And in your practicing and internalizing of a tune, you'll find what your ear wants. So sometimes I will play the natural 9 here or the flat 9. Either way, they both sound awesome. They both sound lovely. And many options sounding awesome and lovely is the thing that gets us so tripped up in jazz, right? What should I play here? Some people say this, some people say this. This sounds fine, this sounds good, this sounds... Well, I am recommending specific options so you don't have to worry about all that. So you can just get to playing and improvising, and you can work on all your alternate options in the long term and in the future. But we need something to play with. So that's why I'm recommending all your scales, all your exact chord interpretations and voicings and stuff like that. So just a couple more things here. There's a lot of substitutions here, tritone substitutions in particular. The 5 of F7 is C7. So you would often see that, just like this is the 5 of this, B flat going to here. Okay, but this is not C7, obviously. This is a tritone away from C7. A tritone is like a sharp 4 or a flat 5 interval. It's the exact middle of the octave. A tritone away from C is G flat. And it's G flat is a half step above F. You can always play a dominant 7th chord a half step above something to resolve to it, because that is the tritone of the 5 of that thing. And you don't even have to think of it that way or know it or explain that. You just think, oh, dominant 7th chord a half step above, anything can resolve to that. You could play this D minor 7 and then play an A flat 7 and go down to G7. You can just add it in. You can do that with your improvisations, even if no one's playing those chords, that A flat 7, or you can do that with chords. So if I'm playing that right here, got the guitar in my hand, so I might as well show you. So we got D minor 7 and then just kind of walk to that. So that's a little hint behind what's happening with dense jazz harmony. Well, a composer or arranger has just decided on that ahead of time. But in the moment, improvisers and players are just doing those all the time. You can just have an exercise where you add that before every chord. You can add a dominant 7th chord a half step above every chord in any song and just have fun with it that way until it gets in your ear and you do it for fun wherever you want. And again, you can do that with your lead playing, even if no one's playing that extra chord, or you can do that just with your chords, even if no one's playing lead over that specific chord, right? It all works that way. It's superimposed, interesting, adding tension, resolution, that kind of thing. So tritone substitution to here. Okay, more on that on my channel soon. I'll do a whole video on tritone substitution. Make sure you are subscribed for that. We have a slash chord here. I really love adhering to bass movement, melodic motion. This is the root, goes down a whole step, so the flat 7 is in the bass, and then down another half step. I always play those, even if a bass player is playing them, because I just love that intentionality there. So my chord voicings I'm going to show you are going to include those. So yeah, lots of dense chords going on here. Minor 6 and or major 6 and major 7 are always interchangeable. So if you see major 6, you can play major 7. If you see major 7, you can play major 6. And we have a big key change here, which we'll talk about more of that stuff in the improvisation section. So let's go on and just learn the chords, and I will come back to that and do a little more analysis when we talk about the scales and the keys and what we need to improvise over it, because then it gets even more detailed. So let's just learn the chord shapes. Now I'll play you 2 different versions of the chord shapes for this tune. I'll play you each chord once each time a chord changes, and I'll show you the chord shape diagrams on the screen as I'm playing. I encourage you to practice along with these demonstrations as you are working on getting the chords down. First, I'll play you the chords using the simplest chord shapes possible. These are often called shell voicings, and they're widely used in jazz. They have the root, the 3rd, and the 7th, or the root, the 3rd, and the 6th, which is all the information we need. Nice, simple sound. Then we'll do a more fuller version of the chords after that. Here's that demonstration of the shell voicings at 70 beats per minute. Now I'll play you the more common jazz guitar chord shapes for body and soul. This whole progression has really rich chords. These chords have an extra note in them, and they will fill out the sound a little more. They're not always extensions. Sometimes they're extensions. Sometimes they're just adding the 5 of the chord. This demonstration is also at 70 beats per minute. Here it is. want to show you something really cool about the bridge here. The bridge is the D major 7, then it goes to E minor 7, so that's the 1 chord and 2 chord in D major. And then it goes to D major again, first inversion. So this is a voicing that I like to play. That is the 3rd, 7 root, so 7 and root are next to each other. 3rd, 7 root, 5th. Okay, but that's really hard to get to. I teach this chord shape and all the versions like that in my courses called Jazz Comping Mastery. But here's, and you'll, if you look at other lead sheets, you might see the chord progression be D major, E minor 7, and then F sharp minor 7. And that is the chord shape that I gave you for this. Why? Because this chord shape is actually can be interpreted as a first inversion D major 9. This is the 3rd of D, this is the 7 of D, this is the 9 of D, and this is the 5 of D. So it can sound like 1, 2, 3 of the key. But really this chord, in my interpretation of the tune and my opinion for what is more accurate for it, is actually the D chord again and not going up to that 3 chord. Does it really matter if they're so similar? No, not really. You can totally do it any way you want. And so that is a voicing of D major 9 without the root. I think of the root right here and I kind of anchor my view there, see the root here, and I see this as the 3rd on the fretboard, and then I make that shape off of it there. So just wanted to point that out, that you might say, hey, that chord shape looks familiar. Why are you playing that minor 7, but it says that it's major 7, because it's a first inversion. So here's that shape again, that is the first inversion, 3, 7, 1, 5. The 1 is there, just bringing it up a whole step, and then playing that. So there are a lot of chord voicings like that where you can play other voicings that are rootless or inversions of other chords that are just shapes that you already know. So I think that's a pretty cool concept. Just wanted to point that out since we learned that shape and I wanted to explain it. Not in every video in this series, but in many of them, I also offer a specific comping tip. Well, I already kind of shared my comping tip for this video, which is that you can add a half step above any chord. And you can do that just with a root note, or you can do that as a dominant 7th chord. So if we just start at the beginning here, and we play E flat minor 7, and then we'll just go straight to this. So 2 beats of this, and then B flat 7, flat 13. Well, on that 4th beat, you can go, and let's go through it more and just do the root movement. So next is A flat, so I'm going do, do to A flat. Next is D flat, do, do to E, D flat, do, do to G flat 7, do, do to F minor 7, and then E diminished, do, do. Okay, so just those first 4 measures. Okay, so it can work really well just with root notes. It's nice to add that. Let's hear it now. Okay, you can do different rhythms and stuff too. Let's add the chords now. So we got E minor 7, and then 2 beats of that, 1, 2, and then B flat 7, flat 13, and then just 1 beat of that, and then play this, E7 with a 9, and then back to that. So measure 1, E flat minor 7, B flat 7, flat 13, E7, or just we'll say E9, boom, I'll play that again. Okay, now I'm just doing it on the beats now. So E flat minor 7, and we're going to A flat 7, so I'll play A7, A dominant 7, into that A flat. Okay, so here's the first 2 measures. I went on, I played a D9, D7 with a 9 to the D flat major. Okay, then you can play G7, just a G7 into G flat 7. Okay, then you can play a F sharp or G flat 9, G flat 7 with a 9 into F minor 7. Okay, I'm going to do all those. It's almost like a walking chord thing now, right? So is that overdoing it? Well, that's up to your taste. Do you want to do it a bunch if you want to use it just even sparsely here and there? Yeah, do an exercise where you do it a ton so you get used to where you like it. But that is my comping tip for this lesson, that you can add those extra chords in. You don't have to understand even the theory of it. I know it's desirable to understand the theory of it. And often that's a tritone substitution theory concept. But who cares? Just play it if it sounds good to you, knowing dominant 7, half step above, or dominant 9 if it's convenient, and you like the sound of that. So pretty fun to add those in places where it's not explicitly written in, and you are essentially kind of reharmonizing a little bit and adding harmonic embellishment and density, and players love that kind of stuff. And it just feels more interactive and more improvisational instead of just playing only what you planned out. So hope you enjoy that tip. Let's move on. Next, I will show you 2 different options for the scales you need to be able to improvise and solo over the body and soul chord progression. It's a lot because there's a lot of chords here. It's going to be really fun, and I'll demonstrate chord tone improvisation after that, but we're going to do 2 different versions of the scales, a complete scales version and then a simplified scales version. I'll demonstrate and show diagrams of all the scales in one specific overlapping position on the fretboard, so I can connect together ideas within that overlapping position. And let's do an analysis of the scales sheet first. I'll demonstrate all the scales and then demonstrate improvising with them. Let's take a look at the complete scales sheet for body and soul. That's the sheet with all the chords in the form and then shows the scales that the chords come from. Sometimes scales are there's just a right answer for the scale that a chord comes from. For example, this E minor 7, A7, D, that's 2, 5, 1 in D major. Everybody would say, oh yeah, 2, 5, 1 in D major. The scale all of those come from is D major. But then there are other chords where really it takes a lot of head scratching and interpretation, and there's not a right answer. There's multiple right answers. You can do so many things. Often dominant 7th chords do this to us, where you have so many things, so many options. I already mentioned here how I'm choosing to think of the dominant 7th chord going to a minor chord, resolving to a minor chord, as pretty much always harmonic minor as my go-to choice. But that this naturally, if you really said, well, what's the 5 of 2 in the key of D flat major? Well, it actually could have a natural 9. So the harmonic minor scale here, E flat harmonic minor, has a flat 9, but you could play it with a natural 9. That would actually end up being E flat melodic minor instead. So 1 note difference. Okay. They both sound great. They're both correct. They both are awesome. Ideally we want to have whatever amount of options ready so we can express ourselves and play what we want to hear. Side note about playing what we want to hear. At least for me, I can't hear stuff that I haven't really practiced. Sometimes I can, but my point is, what if you don't hear something? What if play by ear, you want to play what you want to hear? Well, you're going to hear stuff that you drill, right? So I can hear the G flat Lydian dominant and want to express myself with that, but only because I've drilled it, and only because I was like, oh, what scale do I want? Oh, this sounds good, and this works, and here's why. And then I play it and use it. And then when I get there, I can actually hear what I want to play from it. So don't hesitate to drill stuff and listen to it and let that become what you hear later. And don't beat yourself up for not, knowing what you want to sound like or what you want to play until you've actually, everything we learn and everything we get down is from the practice time. So most of this is D flat major, and the context here is interesting because that's the 2 chord of D flat major. So we're playing D flat major. That's the key we're in. We're going to modulate over to D major, half step up modulation, which is very cool sounding. But if we just saw this chord by itself as the first chord, we might think, oh, it's the first chord of a tune. This is a minor tune, and I'm going to play it as natural minor. I'm going to play it as E flat Aeolian. But actually, this is the 2 of this key. So what you're going to notice more and more as you play this stuff is that context really matters. Here's another context moment over here. This is a minor 2-5, and there's a repeat sign, so it goes back to here. Well, I didn't include the flat 9 or flat 13 here. Not on purpose, actually, but now I'm glad that I didn't, because I want to encourage you to, not encourage you, but give you a heads up about reading context, right? So you're not just like, oh, B flat 7. That's all I see right there. Tunnel vision, B flat 7. No, it's the 5 after this half diminished chord. So it's a minor 2 to a 5 chord, then going to a minor chord. So if I see that ever, I am automatically thinking of that as having a flat 9 and having a flat 13, because that's the context that it's around. You could play it, again, you could play it differently. I'll a lot of times add those flat 9, flat 13s on any dominant 7th chord going anywhere. I'll add it to this, to here, just because it sounds nice resolving, even though it's not there. So to a major chord, and that's very common. I mean, Charlie Parker's doing stuff like every player's doing stuff like that. So you do these enough, and you do start to hear them and want to play these different things, but you just drill it like crazy at first. But this is a cool context moment just to say, yeah, that by default the main option should be a flat 9. Well, that's what I gave us here. This E flat harmonic minor scale is that scale that has a flat 9 there and a flat 13. If all of this is over your head, don't worry. It all comes from the hands-on playing, and it's good to be exposed to hearing the terminologies. That's why I'm going to show you everything on the guitar next and all the scale forms in one position, and you can just start no matter what level you're at. There's something for you to grab here. That's really important. I have a lesson on being your own best teacher. That's really critical, that you take anything you're trying to learn and adjust it to where you're at and what you need. Make it harder if you need it to be harder. Make it simpler if you need it to be simpler. Grab a little piece if you're not ready for more. Expand on it if it's too simple. Well, it's all here for us. Just wanted to say some of those comments. We moved to the D flat major. If it's a diminished chord, I pretty much just default will do a diminished scale. We moved to C major here. There's this D natural minor here for a second. We'll talk more about this later in the series. This is called a backdoor dominant. This is like 2-5 in the key of D. That's why it's D major then D natural minor. And then this is tricky down here. I'm actually doing a little bit of a simplified scales approach. This I'm just thinking of as a passing chord, so I'm not even addressing it at all. I'm just treating this as the chord, C mixolydian, ignore that completely. We're going to ignore more stuff in a second with my simplified scales approach. But even with the complete scales, I'm considering that an additional passing chord, though the melody is harmonized by it. And then B flat mixolydian, which honestly, and then there is more to the tune, but it does the A section again. It's all the same. So honestly, I shouldn't have said B flat mixolydian here. I should have said the E flat harmonic minor again, because it's basically this chord again, right? So here we are, a little test for exactly what I was just sharing, which is context. Oh, this is the 5 going back to that. Oh yeah, I'm pretty much going to treat it, for me at least, as my default option, the harmonic minor, or you could do that E flat melodic minor, so this has a natural 9 instead of a flat 9, or absolutely just the regular B flat mixolydian is totally fine. So now I sound like what we've all heard so many times when you look up or try to learn or ask somebody, or when you're learning about what to play. Oh, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. Well, that's why I created this. Like, forget all that. Choose one option. You can choose your own. I'm giving you suggestions here and what works for me and what I like. So like, hey, let's get good at this and express ourselves with something. And then, yeah, you can do all these alternate options later, but let's work on playing through the tune. Now, playing through a tune like this with all these scales is really tricky. And you might think, oh, are we ignoring some of these too? Actually, this is 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, all in D major. So that's pretty cool. All those chords are actually just straight up from the key. So we're not ignoring some of those. But I was going to say, a tune like this, I really will make sure I have my chord tones down so I don't have to think scale, 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 scale. But the scales are important too. I'll say something about this, which is the G flat Lydian dominant scale, why I chose that, because you could play different scales there. Well, G flat is the 4 chord of D flat. And if it was, and it's a dominant 7th chord in this case, but if it was from the key, it would just be a major 7 chord. And the 4th mode of a major key is Lydian, which means it's a major scale with a sharp 4. If you turn it dominant 7 and you play the scale for that, then it's Lydian dominant. So naturally, this is a context thing again. I'm not just playing, oh, G flat 7, I'm going to play mixolydian. Or G flat 7, I'm going to just do something that I do on a dominant 7th chord. Like, no, the context is that it's the 4 chord as dominant 7 of this key. Okay, you don't have to memorize the details there. The point is the context. Just like 5 chord of minor, context. 4 chord as dominant 7, context turns it into this. You could also just play, this as an altered scale, or, you could do various types of scales with any dominant 7th chord, but that's why I chose that one specifically. So lots of information there. Let's just jump to the guitar and I'll demonstrate the actual scales up and down. And if you don't have those down, it's just great to practice those. And baby steps. This is getting complicated. In this series, we're slowly getting more complex harmonically. So baby steps. If you like this tune, or if you just want something to practice and you're working on, hey, I just want to show up and have that quality time with the guitar and work towards my goals, take these 2 chords and go back and forth with those 2 chords, the 2 scales. Great. That's amazing practice. You could do that for weeks and make huge progress. And that's going to come up in hundreds of other songs. So don't get overwhelmed by the whole tune. Yes, our goal is to play through the whole tune of the songs we love, but you can also just loop, isolate, extract, grab bits and pieces of it and make sure that you're filling in exactly the thing that you need to fill in. So let's jump to the guitar and demonstrate those scales. Here are all the scales demonstrated that are from that complete scale sheet, all within roughly a single position on the fretboard, so we can connect our ideas together. It's a great way to work on your improvisation. Here is the D flat major scale. Sometimes I'll just play it as a collection of notes like that because so many chords in this tune are coming from that scale. We just think of it as a map of notes, as opposed to needing to emphasize D flat, which, so many other chords are coming from it. You don't need to emphasize D flat. We'll come back to that concept and that point in a second. Here is the E flat harmonic minor scale. So I might land on the root sometimes just so we hear that root. And if it is specifically a mode on a specific chord, you might want to, like on this one, G flat Lydian dominant. This is the same as D flat melodic minor, but it's on that G flat 7 chord that we said is going to be G flat Lydian dominant. Well, you might want to start on the root and emphasize the root a bunch. Notice how that has a really specific sound. That's the sound of the mode. So when it's specifically a mode that you are playing, that's a very great way to practice it. When a scale is being used on a bunch of different chords, just a collection of notes is fine. Here's the E diminished scale. I love that one. Now we went way over here for a specific reason. I teach all of this in my course called Nail the Changes, but there's a system that I devised for kind of deciding on these single positions of each of these scales and chord tones and everything. So I just have one right answer and I can connect everything together. It really truly changed everything for me, which is why I teach it. So, okay, interesting. Everything's supposed to connect together, but we have this G flat Lydian dominant scale, that we just worked on way over here. And then we have this E diminished scale way over here. Well, that's because in that system, somewhere at least, you have to switch. If you never switch back to a position, you're just going to crawl up the fretboard forever, say if you're going through the circle of fourths or something. So E is the scale that I'd switch on. For example, little digression here, but worth it. The B major scale is here in my system, and then from B to E, if we're going through the circle of fourths, I switch over to E over here. And everything after E is connected, everything before B is really connected. But that shift is just to get us back into fourth, fifth, sixth position. So every major scale can be played in the fourth, fifth, or sixth position. So every major scale is within there. So the E major scale goes out of it goes into the 7th position if I play it here. So that's why I shift over here. And then from those major scale positions, I let every other mode and every other scale type be dictated. So here's the root with my pinky on the E major scale. And so therefore, I'm going to play the E diminished scale with my root as the pinky. So again, it just dictates what everything has to be, and it just makes everything so much simpler, and I can actually focus on playing and improvising, and it really works. Now, as far as you're playing up here, and then if the quote-unquote correct answer, remember, this is just your practice time. You later let it go all over the fretboard, that's fine. But say I'm playing over here in this, in the G flat Lydian, and then you want to change to, or just say we're in D flat major. And then you want to change to E, and it has all these notes over here. Well, the E diminished scale, I mean. Well, it's a good thing, turns out to be, because then it forces within the system practice of shifting positions as well in a couple places, and the interesting challenges that come up from that, such as some overlapping notes and whatnot. I can't help but share this extra information as I go. Let's go on with the scales on the sheet. This is B flat harmonic minor scale. Okay. Okay, B flat harmonic minor. Here's D major. Okay, here's D natural minor. Here is C major. And that, of course, is the same as A natural minor. And here is E flat diminished. And here is C mixolydian. That's one you could do as root to hear the mixolydian mode if you want. Here's B flat mixolydian. This is the last one. I'll do it root to root. Yeah, the root's on the bottom on that one, but you still hear the mixolydian mode better by landing on each root like that. So those are all the scales. Let me demonstrate improvising strictly with those scales. And keep in mind, these improv demonstrations are limited on purpose. I'm going to demonstrate improvising just with those scales and just in the positions that I have showed you. In my real improvisation, I will use that as my foundation, but do anything I want. I'll play chromatic notes. I'll branch out. I'll do weird stuff. I'll take risks. I'll, start applying it in other places on the fretboard, stuff like that. But it's a fun limitation for me to demonstrate because can I do something nice to demonstrate improvisation with just those scales in just that position, not even adding enclosures or chromatic notes or anything like that, just what I showed you. So here is that demonstration. let's look at the simplified scales. What does this mean? Well, it means that we are ignoring all of the minutia. We are just thinking in terms of the big landing spots, harmonically speaking. Well, we know that this is in the key of D flat major. We know that this is in D flat major, this is in D flat major, this is in D flat major. Well, we just have that one colorful chromatic chord there targeting back to this, and you don't have to target it. And you can just continue to play D flat major. Do you want to be able to target it? Yeah. The interesting thing is that once you can do it confidently, in your sleep, that kind of level of fluency, that's when players start to realize it's perfectly okay not to do it. But until then, we kind of think what am I supposed to play over that chord? So the point of the simplified scales is let's just play through the tune and know where we are in the most important changes. And often this single chord that's happening and causing tension and going back to the key center does not have to be perfectly addressed. It is just harmonically embellishing, but then you cannot ignore the big key change in the bridge, right? So that's the analysis that I've done for us, is to decide on these moments. And don't worry about in practicing this that it sounds exactly how you want to sound. It's just you're more like, hey, can I play something to get through this tune? Because wouldn't that just be satisfying? So we have, it's so refreshing to look at these after we go through the complete scales. D flat major. Boom, there you go, D flat major. Okay, that's the 4 chord with dominant 7. That means one note is different from the D flat major scale. And so what if it clashes a little bit? Maybe if you realize which note it is, you can just ignore it, or you can play chromatically around it or whatever. So same with this, all of that stuff. So all of this is D flat major. This is a really strong harmonic minor moment for B flat. So I like to include that even in the simple scales, kind of landing on that and targeting there. And then of course we are going back to the beginning here. And I just think all of that straight up D flat major. And the secret sauce here is eventually some chord tones. And even without that, and when I was improvising, the chord tones are pretty essential, even with just trying to play the right scale. When I tried to play the right scale years ago, it really didn't feel right to me because my ear wasn't able to follow the changes. The thing that got me following the changes is the chord tones. Why do I talk so much about scales then? Because they are more of the mystery. The chord tones are inside the scales. You can just find them. You can take your time and find them. It's not instant, but you have the scale diagrams for all in one position. These are just, okay, this is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, off B flat. You can find them. It takes work, but they're not a mystery. The scales are much more of a mystery. So being able to target the chord tones as well as play with the scales is what started to really open things up, for me at least. Now we have D flat major, and we could change to, and then we're changing to D major here, and then just straight up all D major. So same thing again, and we are ignoring these two chords that are the natural minor, the parallel minor of D major. It actually sounds really cool because this is still very much D and kind of doing this D minor thing. So it sounds great with D major. So look at that, all D major. Then we have some C major that you can't ignore here. Very clear. All of that is C major. And then we have that chromatic chord back to C major. And then here I chose very carefully. You could just treat all of this as B flat harmonic minor, or I'm sorry, E flat harmonic minor. But there's a reason I chose B flat Lydian dominant, and that's because it covers this chord really well. It targets back to here just fine. And it also includes chord tone, the essential third of this chord. So I'm just being kind of nerdy about it there, but you can just basically treat this whole measure as some kind of B flat, any kind of B flat 7. And you go back to there and it's fine. And then there is an A section again, which is just out of view on the screen here, but it's just the exact same thing as this. So that's all there. So yeah, this is tricky because it requires being a little more lyrical and spacious and trying to play things that have a pull to them melodically, something that can catch your ear, because if it's not going to hit the harmony, it better catch your ear on its own with some sort of melodic pattern or responding to itself or having phrasing and space and stuff like that. So I try my best to do that. And keep in mind, of course, I sound like me. You don't have to like how I sound. You don't have to sound like me. This is just all the nuts and bolts, right? You can really sound completely different with this same selection of information, a bunch of players can sound completely different. So let's demonstrate, just to show it's possible, the simplified scales improvisation. Let's do that. So the chord tones exist within all of those scales. That's the E flat minor 7 chord tone, or the B dominant 7 chord tone. And I'm talking just 1, 3, 5, 7 or 1, 3, 5, 6 of the chord. Not even the extension. So B flat 7 is that. And so I work on improvising with those so I can really dance around the true skeleton, the core of every harmony, and do that with the scales, and it's how it all comes together. And it takes a long time to work on, of course. Just take it little bits at a time. It can be such a joy. Do one string even, or set of 2 strings in one position, 2 chords back and forth to get started on this. Here's a demonstration of improvising just with those in the same scale forms and positions that all the scales were in, but just with the chord tones. Here's your internalization tip for this lesson if you really want to get inside of a song. After working on some amount of that improvisation, whatever your thing is, and the simplified scales work really well for this, you want to try to improvise around the melody. So you've worked on playing the melody, you've worked on some form of improvisation, whether it's complete scales, simplified scales, chord tones, something like that. You want to so you can dial it up, dial it down. You can kind of be playing the melody and embellishing, or you can be making it less recognizable and really just improvising on it. And it's really a fun thing to do. And once you've done any amount of successful improvisation and you know the melody pretty well, it can come together easier than you think. And this is a really fun concept because it allows your improvisation to sound unique on the song, appropriate for the song, so you don't just always sound the same. Something we're all struggling with, right? We're just going to play the same stuff on every single song? Well, if you dance around the melody, even very roughly, and just be loose with it, then it can help a lot. So I'll demonstrate just the A section of that real quick, even though I kind of did right now, but with the backing track as well, I'll demonstrate. And just all of this stuff, don't expect it to sound great right away. Have fun trying, have fun falling on your face with it. This is such a great thing to do that so many people don't do. You're playing the melody, you learn how to improvise a little bit, you want to try to add some chromaticism or chord tones or, whatever your thing is that you're adding in. And then can you just kind of roughly play the melody and then play some stuff around it? At first it's hard, but then it actually will end up grounding you quite a bit and giving you a path to play on. So here's an example of that just on the A section. I think the funnest part about that is you can get so loose with it. You can really go outside of all of those constraints that we talked about. What's the scale? Where should you be? Well, you don't have to be anywhere. Those are all just guidelines. And the melody as a guideline allows you to let go of even more of that, because no matter what you do, you can come back to something roughly, not even necessarily resembling the melody, but like in that zone of the melody. And I think it loosens things up quite a bit and makes it unique to the song. So that is my internalization tip for this video. I'll give you my guitar listening recommendation for Body and Soul in 1 second, but first you can access and download the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on YouTube by becoming a premium supporter. You'll get PDFs of the chord progression lead sheet, the scale breakdown sheets for soloing, the scale diagrams, the chord shape diagrams, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. You'll get everything in most of these lessons in the series. Many of them, you'll get everything except for the melody sheet music, because many of the songs are not in the public domain. But this song, Body and Soul, is in the public domain, and several of the other tunes are. And in that case, and in those cases, you will get also the melody sheet music, the tabs, just all of it. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support and get all those extra resources, not only for this series, but for many of my other lessons on YouTube, or you can go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. Listening to the songs that we're working on is really important, and not just casually listening, not just having heard it, not just knowing about it, but listening intently, listening deeply, finding time to listen to it in the dark with your eyes closed or on a walk or something like that. And listening to the same version many, many times really can imprint the sound of the harmony, the melody someone's playing, the licks. It helps so much to have a version that you listen to. Definitely listen to that Coleman Hawkins recording, but every recommendation in this series is a jazz guitar listening recommendation. If you want specifically a jazz guitar body and soul version that I recommend Mary Osborne on her album called A Girl and Her Guitar. So that's what I recommend. There's a link to a playlist of all my listening recommendations in the description. Make sure you listen to that or some other version, like I said. Next jazz standard that we are going to do is The Girl from Ipanema. So make sure you are subscribed. I can't wait to see you in that lesson. It's going to be number 18. We're getting up there in the series, and I'm looking forward to that very much. Hit that like button and leave a comment to let me know if you liked this lesson. It really makes a difference. It helps people find the videos. It reaches more people. Check out the description for all the links I've mentioned and for how you can support the channel. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. Take care and happy practicing.